Hey there everyone, and welcome to the channel for another Escape From Tarkov video, this time with a bit of news relating to some changes to supply at the level 1 and 2 traders that actually has some pretty big effects on the builds you're able to set up and run effectively at these early trader levels, and the return of our beloved AP6.3 9mm ammo to the traders. I was kind of in the middle of setting up some level 2 trader build videos when this news dropped, so I figured I would shift gears and talk about some of these changes specifically, my perspective on why they were made, and give a bit of commentary on how these ammo restrictions just sort of further push the early white meta towards using the same two builds if you want to be really effective at taking down PMCs. The aim is to try not to descend into complaining about the changes and be at least kind of objective about them as much as possible. In some ways, I see these changes as just furthering the divide between high-level grinders and the average player, but I can also see it as encouraging players to actually use some of the attachments and ammo types that honestly had no real purpose, while better items were available at the same level traders. First up, and probably the most significant change to mid-level ammo availability and the overall power level of achieving level 2 traders, the extremely popular 7.62x51 M80 round has been removed from level 2 Peacekeeper and pushed up the ladder to level 3 Peacekeeper, going from a pretty simple level 14 unlock to level 23 and requiring you to complete skier quests to unlock Peacekeeper quests, and then completing a bunch of those quests until he's level 3. This is, to me at least, a pretty big deal. M80 had kind of taken over as the de facto best ammo available in the early-ish game of Tarkov by a pretty large margin. Stats-wise, it isn't that much better than something like 7.62 PS ammo, but it was the ultimate mid-level round and something that was a pretty big deal when you unlocked it. This ammo gave all players after level 14 an option to effectively defeat level 4 body armor at Peacekeeper level 2, and whether using it in the classic RFB build, a Vepr Hunter, or even an M700, M80 ammo was sort of an equalizer for the mid-game. Moving it to Peacekeeper level 3 just really extends the time frame where the average player doesn't have access to ammo that can hit through class 4 armor on the first shot, or do really any serious damage to players who manage to get a class 5 armor early on. On the flip side, M80 being available so early on also kind of negated any advantage of getting class 4 armor that you unlock at Ragman level 2 or find out in the raid, since this $3 bullet unlocked before you got access to class 4 armor, meaning that by the time you got that decent armor, there was already a bullet that anyone can purchase that totally defeats that armor. I have kind of come around to the idea that certain calibers, like 7.62x51 being available really early, kind of skewed the power level of everything else, making things seem kind of useless, but only because M80 existed so early on. For example, all the 5.56, 5.45, and 9mm ammo available at level 1 and 2 traders felt kind of pointless when you could just grind to M80 and run an RFB for 50,000 rubles from Skier. The power creep of the RFB was immediately noticeable in the 12.12 patch, going from sort of a disliked weapon to a budget meta choice, almost solely because you could get M80 early on, and that ammo just trumped everything else available for medium range fights. To make a long story short, I think in some ways M80 being moved to level 3 is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it will make the life of players who don't level up fast a lot more difficult, since they no longer have this do-it-all round that can take down class 4 armor easily for a cheap price. On the other hand, I don't hate the idea that there's no longer one single build available at level 2 traders that just does more damage, is better against armor, and is so cheap to purchase than everything else. I think this will be a very controversial change, and without some buffs to 5.56 and 5.45, overall it's kind of a straight up nerf to the power level of anyone below Peacekeeper level 3. It also does nothing to really change the overblown effectiveness of the other two early game rounds that are just straight up better than everything else, 7.62 PS and 45 FMJ, specifically when used with an UMP. While M80 was the king of the early to mid game ammo, 7.62 PS with an AKM and 45 FMJ through an UMP are two more builds that just sort of walk circles around almost everything else available before the level 3 traders. These two ammo types are, if I had to take an educated guess, by far the most used ammo for basically everyone in the first couple months of the wipe, because they're used in some of the most cost-effective builds in the game, and the stats on the ammo are just really good for the price. M80 at least provided a third alternative, so for the time being, I highly suspect there will be even more UMPs and AKMs rolling around out there in Tarkov. The second big ammo change is actually a positive one in my opinion, and that is the reintroduction of AP6.3 ammo to Peacekeeper level 3, with 90 rounds available for about $7 per bullet, and I don't believe it's quest locked. This is something that I kind of ranted about for the entire 12.12 patch, lamenting the fact that 9mm setups had been forced into leg meta strategies for almost a year, because the armor-piercing ammo types were not sold by traders, and the crafting options just paled in comparison to other ammo. Yes, there was a time when 9mm AP ammo was among the most oppressive setups to play against, but that was a long time ago, and things have changed a lot since then. The new recoil system already makes SMGs harder to use. 7.62 BP and M62 ammo have really become the main pillars of the Chad loadout, and most players just kind of completely stopped running 9mm loadouts after a while, because between ammo and recoil problems, there was no real compelling reason to run them anymore. The recoil issue hasn't changed, but at least with access to some AP ammo from the traders, it's a lot easier to get 9mm builds up and running if you want to, and they're not totally helpless against anything above class 3 armor. You can still only buy 90 rounds at a time, which means you need to ration it out in those high fire rate weapons, but at least it's an option. Now I can stock up for a day or two and run some MPX loadouts if I want to, without committing 8 hours of crafting time for a few bullets, or being forced to aim for the legs. I would still like to see some fine tuning to the recoil on 9mm SMGs, especially the MP5 and the MPX. These two builds have a technically lower recoil stat than most other guns in the game, but regardless, they still tend to jump like crazy as soon as you pull the trigger, making them tricky to use unless you're point firing at close range. That being said, I think this is a nice step in the right direction, and I'll be stocking up on 6.3 ammo fairly regularly. One more change that I feel is worth discussing at the early traders is the removal of the MK12 gas block from level 1 traders, replacing it with the railed gas block at level 1 Peacekeeper. The MK12 is kind of an important part when it comes to modding M4s and ADARs in the early game. It allows you to remove the front sight post completely and is a vital part when it comes to adding new handguards onto the M4, because basically all of the handguards in the game need a low profile gas block or they won't work with your build. I just went into the preset menu quickly to check this, and as you can see here, out of everything I have unlocked, there's only 3 handguards that actually work with the railed gas block, and everything else is incompatible. On the one hand, this is not really the end of the world. You technically can't buy most of these handguards until after you get Peacekeeper level 2 anyways, so from that standpoint, it doesn't really change much for some players. However, it does kind of radically limit your ability to collect mods in the raid and kit out your M4 or ADAR, which is one of my favorite early wipe strategies, and I don't think I'm alone in that one. It also makes the level 1 barter for the Daniel Defense handguard practically useless, because now you can't even attach it to your rifle if you did the barter for the handguard. I think the core of my opposition to this change is just the simple fact that the Tarkov community already feels like 5.56 is in a bad spot, to the point where a lot of players call it a useless ammo type and won't even use it. So with that in mind, removing attachments that are kind of necessary when it comes to modding 5.56 weapons from the level 1 traders just seems kind of overkill, like we're kicking the M4 while it's already on the ground begging for its life. Players already didn't trust 5.56 ammo, and now the weapons are harder to mod in the early game. It's a small issue on the surface, but it just further pushes 7.62 PS and 45 FMJ builds out into the spotlight as the ultimate early game choices with very little competition from other builds. Well, that kind of covers it for my overview of these changes to early traders, and I'll admit, I didn't really see any of these changes coming. I was expecting M80 to become more expensive or less available to buy per reset, but not the move to level 3 Peacekeeper. AP6.3 is good to see back at the traders, and the gas block change is a pretty small issue for the most part, but I think 5.56 enjoyers are going to be quite annoyed by that change. Personally, I would love to see some nice barters appear for M80 and for the gas block, but only time will tell if those come along. What do you think? Are these changes just necessary growing pains, or reactionary adjustments aimed at slowing down an ever faster and faster progression through Tarkov? Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream, Discord server, and Patreon page down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.